Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the second session during the Virtual Fintech Forum. We'll be taking a deep dive into ESG and sustainability now. And keynote for us today will be Ms. Benedict Nolans, who will be speaking about FinTech and green finance. Ms. Benedict Nolans is the head of the BIS Innovation Hub, Hong Kong Center. Prior to this appointment, she was the managing director at SC Ventures, the innovation arm of Standard Chartered Bank, that leads a series of new ventures across digital banking, banking as a service, SME finance, and blockchain. From 2018 to 2019, she was the vice president of the International Government Relations at Circle, involved in the evolution of blockchain and digital assets. From 2012 to 2018, she was the head of risk and strategy of the Hong Kong Securities and Futures Commission, the SFC, and in that capacity, also acting as a vice chair of the Committee on Emerging Risk and the FinTech Research Lead for the International Organization of Securities Commission, ISCO. From 2007 to 2012, she was Managing Director at Credit Suisse. And before that, from 1997 to 2007, she was an Associate and Executive Director at Goldman Sachs. Originally from Belgium, she holds an LLM and an MBA degree from the University of Chicago and University of Leuven. She is admitted to the New York Bar since 1999. In 2006, she was a recipient of the China Daily Asian Women Leadership Awards for her efforts related to entrepreneurship, innovation, and charity. She remains closely engaged in these topics, most recently through her involvement in the FinTech Association of Hong Kong and the Women in Finance Asia. Benedict, we're truly honored to have you here, and welcome to the Virtual Fintech Forum.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for the introduction.
We look forward to hearing from you. How about we deep dive into the presentation that you have for us, and we can then go into the Q&A question and the fireside chat right after. Over to you.
Good. So I'll share the screen. Can you see that well?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay. So as you have introduced, I'm currently the head of the Hong Kong Center for the BIS Innovation Hub. And this presentation will focus on finance for a greener and a cleaner world. Oops. Oh, okay. Sorry, it wasn't moving, but I think it's moving now. Okay, good. So first of all, just to explain that my involvement with green is actually a really long-term involvement. So I started my life being really interested in everything about nature. And as the UN PRI came around, which I will introduce to you a little bit later, I did took note of it. And I think it was already at the time, I thought it was the right direction of finance. So I started being involved with ESG as early as my days at Goldman Sachs, which was from 1997 till 2007, not to date myself. But then later I joined Credit Suisse, and equally so was involved in the green area. And so this specific picture you see here is from a trip through Brazil. And I can tell you a bit more about it later, but it was all focused on the ESG agenda. So as mentioned, in 2006, the UN PRI saw the light of day. And for those who don't know what it is the UN Principles on Responsible Investment. And in my own view, this was really the start of people focusing on the importance of integrating ESG factors into investment analysis and decision makers. And so as you can see from these principles, the different asset managers that signed up to the UN PRI each pledged to these core principles that they would be active owners and incorporate ESG issues, that they would seek appropriate disclosure on ESG issues, that they will promote the acceptance and the implementation of these principles, and that they will work together to enhance the effectiveness of implementing the principles. And that each will report on their activities and progress on ESG in an active fashion. So again, this was 2006, and we can come back later to how long it took to actually get to this. So in 2012 around, I joined the SFC. And in the SFC, I was tasked to do a report on asset management, which I dubbed Asset Management Looking Forward. And the last chapter of this research focuses on ESG and ESG factors. And what I would note is that we put in there this very small chart, which I would say up until to date is probably the most simple presentation I've personally made about how you can get ESG to be adopted. So first thing first is the asset owners need to put pressure on the asset managers. So who are the asset owners? For example, sovereign wealth funds in the world or pension funds are the asset owners. They're the ones who can say to the asset managers, that's all the people who are registered to manage the funds of these asset owners, they can tell them that we need you to integrate ESG factors. Now, once the asset managers have that into the mandate of the asset owner, that's when they start looking for ESG tools and ESG technology. And that's when they start asking from banks and investment banks for investment research. And once you have these combined, then essentially you move to the next aspect of this virtual cycle of pressure, I would say, which is that the corporates need to start disclosing their ESG performance a lot better and a lot more actively. So again, this was published in 2014. So in 2016 is when you see the regulatory attention on this area improve or actually fundamentally shift and increase. And I would say that the leading central bank in that regard was actually the PBC, because they came up with a paper on establishing China's green financial system. It wasn't just one paper, it was a sequel of papers that focused on the principal aspects of what green finance means. And these papers were drafted in conjunction with the industry, so they incorporate a lot of industry feedback as well. And very soon after, the same year, the European Commission issued its paper, also defining what green finance really is and what it should focus on. And you can see here the outline, but essentially it includes focus on green bonds, green lending, green listed equity, and then of course the measuring of the environmental impact, for which you indeed need technology tools. From 2016 onward, you see a boom of green bonds. So somehow the green bonds were the product that first took off. And in fact, a lot of credit goes to the Climate Bonds Initiative, which was a voluntary industry initiative and shows the power of voluntary industry initiatives to define what a green bond is and what standards need to be met before a bond should label itself as a green bond. And around it also are a series of other research and labeling services. And so green bonds have continued growing, and as of 2020, we've hit a record year, and as of 2021, it will be even a further record beyond what you see on this chart. Sorry, it's a little bit delayed in its response. Okay, so 2021 and beyond, what would I see as the future? I think we're now really firmly moving into looking at accountability and measurement. And I think that technology is absolutely key to securing measurement. And I've given here a couple of examples, but first of all, AI can collect data and analyze data. But there's also the possibility of using blockchain, for example, for registering outputs from either solar farms or, for example, from wind farms. The question is, how will we evolve to a market where we can do carbon trading? Because once carbon trading is better established than it is today, and once carbon credits can be properly tracked, then we will see really the future evolve towards corporates needing to actively buy these offsets. in order to secure a green future for themselves, but also for us more generally. So within the BIS Innovation Hub, we've chosen a project essentially around this topic, which we call Project Genesis. And the reason why we chose Genesis is because from the book of Genesis of the Bible, there are many aspects to this other than it being the first to start. But secondly, as well, it is a book in which the paradise is described, and also the end to paradise. So with this project, we would like to get a little bit closer again to paradise. Now, how will we do that? So this project proposes to tokenize green bonds, and in particular government bonds, and see whether we can create a lot more transparency for the investors, in particular ideally retail investors, on a UI, as you can see here, an iPad or other device, so that they can see what green outputs are being created by the investment from the green bonds. So in our theoretical scenario, the green bonds would be invested in solar farms, and the output would be visible to the investors of these bonds. So another initiative we have within the BIS Innovation Hub that is ongoing right at this moment is the G20 Tech Sprint. The Innovation Hub has actually only been up and running for the past year, but the arrangement we've reached is to try and do one tech sprint a year that is aligned with the priorities of the G20. So this year, the priority that we chose is green and sustainable finance. And this tech sprint currently has 3 problem statements that people can react to. First of all, data collection, verification, and sharing. Secondly, analysis and assessment of transition and physical climate-related risks. And problem statement 3, better connecting projects and investors. And I would note that this specific tech sprint is currently open for application. So for anybody who's watching this, you have another week to make your submissions, because the deadline is the 31st, which, if I remember well, is next Sunday or maybe the day after. So just one more week to go for the submissions. So that's it from my introduction. I guess we can jump here into the open discussion, Mushir.
Thank you, Benedict. That was quite fascinating, right? The journey from Brazil all the way to talking about the tech sprint. And it is becoming more and more prevalent for not just regulators, but financial institutions by themselves are looking to integrate sustainability and the green element in all of their services and the clients they work with. But moving on to just having a discussion on what we just saw, the event in Brazil looked interesting. What did you do there?
Yeah, so actually it's a nice story because I had been a little bit of an internal activist in Credit Suisse around green finance and ESG matters. The head of sustainability at the time had a program where he would send one person a year for green education or re-education. So in my case, it was education as opposed to re-education. Yeah. And so we were sent to this camp in Brazil where we had 2 tasks. So one task was to measure the growth of trees. And just so you know, these were like hundreds of years old trees. So to measure them, it's really a precision job. You have to look for the very tiny piece of a millimeter change, let's put it like that. Yeah. The second thing we had to do was weighing leaves, and it's something that was so unusual to me to realize. But essentially, depending on pollution, trees start shedding more leaves. So the scientists would dry these leaves of different species, okay, first collect them and have them dried, and then would weigh them. And the more you see of a certain species, then that species is actually suffering a lot more from pollution. I guess it taught me a lot of things, but the key thing that it taught me is that these are scientific matters. So to get the scientific data, it takes a ton of patience. So for us to collect this stuff, weigh this stuff, sit in the lab, it actually was in some a little bit of re-education even for me. It wasn't, I would say, green re-education, because I'd been firmly convinced of the topic, but it was a little bit of re-education as to what the job of scientist really is. You can't just make assumptions without very careful collection and evaluation and tracking of data. So anyway, that was that event.
Okay, I mean, look, it's heartening to see that there is this initiatives to go, and it must have been it is almost a once in a lifetime experience, right? Going deep into Amazon in Brazil, and how things are changing and how important that space is, and people don't often connect these small nodes that are having that impact, and I guess that's where the PRI of the principles came in, right? Which is very important for green finance, and as we know it today, but. What took the world so long to create something like this? Because we've been talking about climate change and the impact for decades now, but why do you feel it took such a long time to take off?
Yeah, so what I personally find amazing is that these principles were already finished in 2006. And in fact, many asset managers signed up to it, and I forgot the numbers, but at the time it was hundreds of billions of dollars. But yet it's only, you could say, in the last 2 years that people are really starting to put pressure, as I showed, on these asset managers. So it's kind of disappointing in a way. You see what I'm saying? It's like the principles were ready in 2006. People signed up to it to look good. They said, I'm signed up to this. I'm going to do this. But actually very little happened until, I would say, 2 years ago. So it taught me, I guess, one thing, which is that you do need social pressure. You need the world to move on. So while the asset managers in 2006, even those forward-looking ones who signed up to the PRI, while they had all the right intentions, the world wasn't moving. And I think that with a lot of the additional advocacy we've seen, the scientific data around climate change, and the political will in certain key markets in the world, that's made this topic actually move from being a side topic to being mainstream to at least asset owners and asset managers, and then increasingly, as I showed, to the corporates.
And with these corporates, how have you seen them respond globally? Do you see any difference in different parts of the world, Asia versus Europe or North America, Latin, etc.?
Yeah, so when I did the SFC research, I noticed a very large difference. It was really quite interesting in many ways. So actually, we interviewed a mix of local asset managers, China asset managers, European asset managers, and then US asset managers. And at the time, I would say that the Chinese asset managers were more attuned to the topic. So they had understood that it was becoming a priority of the PRC government that green finance be focused on. So, I mean, to put this thing into context for you, I would interview the world's leading asset managers, and I would ask what they did for ESG. And to be frank, some would literally answer, what is ESG? And this was 2013. So you would have people say, like, what is ESG? I don't even know what it is. So I found that incredible, because they said to me, the UNPRI had noticed them already in 2006. So how come, 2013, no one even knows what ESG stands for?
Correct. Yeah.
But I said the Chinese asset managers, I didn't need to explain what ESG was or green finance. They totally knew, because the message had come from the top i.e. from their government. It already had come down starting 2013. So I would say the Europeans were also very good. A number of the European asset managers had been focused on green for quite a while. And I would say even were the leaders on it from that perspective. So for them, it wasn't new to 2013. They had actually been up to it since the PRI. At the time, I hate to say it, but the US was behind. And it goes again towards what I say is that in a sense, if you're functioning with very free markets, like the US is very free markets, right? Then you need for the social pressure to come. Unless the social pressure, the pressure of the population, the belief of the population, unless that changes, actually you don't see change. So the UNPRI, the main signatories were US asset managers, which was the interesting thing. But the progress in 2013 was incredibly limited.
And we hope that thing, it changes now. I think last 2 years have brought a significant change in how companies are looking at it. And beyond asset managers, who would you say are a critical element that also need to adopt ESG practices, especially when it comes to green finance?
Sorry, I missed that question, Bashir.
No, so I was just saying we are seeing a lot of the bigger asset managers globally now actively talk about it and implement, and it's part of their, investor calls and everything else, and their overall strategy. Which are the other players, if I may use the term, who you feel are important to, who should also be replicating the same when it comes to green finance beyond the asset management?
So I've already indicated, for example, in what I set out, that any corporate bond issuers, and those are typically corporates, are sovereigns, so both are now looking at green finance as a huge opportunity, right? Because they can help transform their business, but secondly, they can raise capital, and it's green aka clean capital, right? It should be properly invested. So all the issuers, that means the investment banks that assist those issuers, that means the lawyers that assist those issuers, so their whole ecosystem. But aside from it, the banks, right? So what I didn't cover in this presentation is green lending, but there's a lot of evolution around green lending, green deposits, green data tracking for credit cards. There are really nice startups in that space. And importantly, the central banks are starting to increasingly stress test the books, the banking books, to see if there is brown exposure or excessive exposure to stranded assets. So it's really something for everyone, I would say, every participant in the financial system, including now increasingly the startups that provide the technology solutions to either the data elements or to the stress testing elements, etc.
And this is moving on, and we're now seeing a lot of technology being applied for green bonds and green finance, right? Can you tell us more about the tokenization and the project genesis, and how the technology for tokenization is going to play a role in this?
Yeah, so in fact, for this project, we have 3 technology elements. One is the tokenization of the bonds. The idea there is to fractionalize the bonds to smaller denominations so that retail can invest in it in very small denominations. This actually has been done already, for example, in Thailand. They've already piloted fractionalized bonds like this, which they call the 1 baht bond, but in fact it's 100 baht, but 100 baht is only $3, right? So that's a really small denomination. So fractionalization through tokenization allows you to sell to retail very small amounts. That then in turn allows retail to really be engaged in the topic. And that's let's say the theoretical thing that we're checking and looking on a conceptual level, a prototype level, whether that makes sense to look at doing that and then rolling it out in conjunction with, for example, banks, but maybe also virtual banks, because virtual banks could be quite interested in new product, and secondly as well in connecting with their customer, which is a new generation customer. It's a millennial customer, millennial and beyond that typically is more interested in, are more attuned to the need for control of climate change and therefore green investment. So, and then as I mentioned, there will be a user interface for the retail investor so that they can see that this green bond, for example, has been invested in, let's say in this hypothetical case, solar panels, and they can see what the output, the carbon credits that are being generated by these solar panels. So it's a much more engaged journey. So I said it's fractionalized and it's a much more engaged journey, and that's the focus of Project Genesis.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's and you're right. Right. The millennials are playing a big role. With we've had Greta Thunberg starting that Climate Fridays, and that's become a global phenomena. But kids and young people today are very actively involved in how they want their future to be, and climate change and sustainability is a major element of it. And it's good to see that from a regulator perspective and government side of things that you're also running tech sprints, right? The G20 tech sprint is very, very interesting. And how's the interest been? I know this is just the second edition, but to see a global G20 tech sprint, I think is quite exciting for the participants in the ecosystem.
Yeah. And so the response has been great already. So we've only opened this, I think, less than 10 days ago, something like that. And there's already more than 100 parties registered. So that's 100 startups who want to address either problem statement 1, 2, or 3. I would say for startups, this is an incredibly fantastic opportunity, right? Because if you end up being a winner in a G20 tech sprint, what that means is that the G20 is aware of your product, right? So it's really a spring plank, you could say, to offering to getting the product to be well known, and then offering it more broadly and globally, really, because that's what G20 is. So I would really encourage people to participate in this if they have a currently functional product around either that problem statement 1, 2, or 3. And we welcome startups that are broad thinking. So it doesn't need to be very narrowly on the problem statement as described, as long as it can achieve the problem statement. And even more so, if it is a more original solution, we would be very interested to see these applications.
Okay, no, that's great. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much for taking out time. We're delighted to see the regulatory approach towards green finance and innovation being brought into it, because that's the future. And this is the conference is about Future Unlimited, and we hope the Future Unlimited is green as well. So once again, on behalf of the Virtual Fintech Forum, Startup HK, and Invest Hong Kong, I would like to thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank you, Mashir, for the invitation to speak.
Thank you.